Howdy, everybody. Alright, so, February. Time for the vlog, I suppose. So, digging into the design, we had a playtest this last Saturday. This is an ongoing playtest of Blood from God's Eye, which has actually spanned a few different versions of the mechanics. The players who started off on the first version of Blood from God's Eye are still playing it. So, that's been interesting to see. The Silver Phoenix character was very disappointed in how much I nerfed the early stuff that the Phoenix have. Because they had a lot of really crazy psychic powers starting off. And I think that confirms for me that nerf was really important. Like, the general nerf for the game has had there's been two really significant ones in this latest draft. The first one is that I doubled the steps between everything in the effect chart, with the exception of the first and kind of the last rung. So I think that that really helped to keep rolls within parameters that were a little more acceptable as far as their action output. I was really happy with that because it was a really easy fix. The second one, which required a significant amount more design, was I created basically two more lower tiers of martial arts. I created the form level techniques, which need to get clarified a little bit, but they're the non-magical version of martial arts. And then right above those, I powerfully nerfed the novice level techniques so that they were basically just attacks or just defenses. And they had a very limited amount of power they gave you aside from that. But to compensate for that, the more powerful techniques, expert and above, now leap significantly more in power. So it starts with form level and novice level all adding +1 bonuses. +1 rank bonuses, and then the second you get to expert, it's a +3. So it goes 1, 3, 5, and 7. And master level, which gives you the 5, which is really an impressive jump, cost 40 prana at each usually, so it's harder to use those, but it also pushes up your effect chart so that you can get to those 12, 13s, those second to highest tiers, and then of course the supreme level, which is my rename for the ultimate level, because it's not really going to be the final level, so I needed to change the name a little bit. But the supreme level gets you to 14 plus, and those cost 100. So they're extremely rare. But that, again, kind of works in the fiction. Part of designing this game has been going back to Dragon Ball Z over and over and over. And I'm talking about Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super. Not really gotten super into GT, but paying attention to the pacing mechanism that is introduced with things like power level and like the balance of danger to power that certain techniques give characters, and the build up to certain techniques like the Genki Dama, aka the Spirit Bomb, that draw them out a little bit. So you don't just start fights with the Spirit Bomb usually. It takes some time to charge that shit up. So yeah, the logic of this game has been powerfully informed by the pacing mechanisms that are present in Akira Toriyama's shonen masterpiece. Because really, shonen, as far as shonen manga and shonen anime, like, that really is the fight paradigm that I wanted for this. And Fist of the North Star is the beginning point, and I think that's a really healthy beginning point because, and again, having rewatched that entire series, I don't have access to the manga, but I've been watching the series. Looking at that one, the power gulf between Kinshiro, our protagonist, and the typical Muxi encounters, even the really dangerous ones, is pretty significant. Like, there's very few real matches for Kinshiro, and you still have a satisfying show. You still have like drama, you still have suspense, which is important, and you have him surviving and powering through interesting situations, and seeing this more or less invincible and unstoppable protagonist get put in situations where he believably has to deal with something that causes suspense for the audience, that's been very informative in terms of what needs to be, like, how to preserve that power gulf while still creating a sense of tension. So that's been very interesting and very useful whenever I'm writing the setting stuff. Anyway, our last playtest revealed the need for more streamlined war rules. What I found in this last fight was the players had an army and some tanks, and the enemy had an army and some tanks and some demons. And I liked the monster mechanics a lot. They did about what I predicted that they would do. They had a really, really impressive first round and a less impressive second round. And the players, because the power curve inverts with monsters and players. Players start relatively weak and they get more powerful as the fight progresses. Whereas monsters start really strong, but anytime they take damage, they get weaker. And to compensate for that, they have some abilities that they can unlock. Some of them do whenever they get really damaged, so that they have some kind of like desperation attacks later on. But for the most part, it's an inverted power curve. So it starts really dangerous for the players, and then if they can weather those early rounds and build up power, then they're on equal footing in the mid rounds, and then in the later rounds, they're stomping the hell out of this thing. And that's by design. I did note that the twin whammy of being able to bid almost anything you wanted to go first, and also having a ton of dice spread out before you was pretty powerful. They fought Dan Chong. Now, granted, they went into his tent trying to lie their way into being like people that were on the side of the Shadow Vipers, and he very quickly caught wise to their deception. The way I ran that was that he had certain test questions. He asked one of the players that was masquerading as Yemen the Elephant Eater, because he was playing a Cave Buffalo from the Brotherhood of Freaks, and they have reasonably similar silhouettes, and it's not like Yemen doesn't wear like a cloak and a mask. So yeah, in the dark of the tent, he bought it. He was like, oh, that does look like Yemen, and he actually just kind of assumed it was Yemen, and that added some legitimacy to what the players were doing. But I threw some tests at him, like, okay, so here are Yemen's preferences, and I'll write those down, and he's gonna test this guy. And since they didn't really do much, most parties don't do much with Yemen when they encounter him. They just beat the hell out of him. But since they did that, instead of like talking to him or gathering information about him, I was like, okay, it would have been reasonably possible if they had asked around to get this broadly known information about Yemen. Since they did not do that at all, he's basically gonna have to just guess about these things, and he got them all wrong. So Dan Chong knew something was up, and he's like, okay, this isn't Yemen. These guys probably killed Yemen. These are his tanks that I know he sent out to crush the Golden Lions. So this is some deceptive tactic to get closer to the capital with these tanks. So he bides time, and he has his army surround theirs, and basically hit them when they're the most vulnerable. Their commanders are all in this tent, and they swarm into the tanks with bayonets and guns. And like, okay, surrender now. And they have to surrender. So they lose their tanks, they lose their armies right away. And then he strikes as soon as Tsuchigomo shows up, who he sent a runner for. Again, I did that obviously in front of the characters. Like, he's all personally distracting all three of them, and someone comes up and he's like, you summon me, master? And he's like, yeah, summon Tsuchigomo. And he writes her a letter that they can't read, but he does write it. And he gives it to him, and the guy leaves. And then like an hour of game time later, Tsuchigomo shows up. And it felt like that was a reasonable amount of time to wait for that demon to sprint from the docks to the middle of the city. And yeah, so she captures the angel that one of them has enslaved, and tries to suck its blood, but you can't really do that as a demon, so it actually poisons her. But Dan Chong takes that as a moment to attack them, and he rolls, like, I think he's got 16 dice. So he rolls them, and I was just spreading this massive pile of dice out in front of me. And I didn't actually have enough with me, so I had to write down the results, and then roll again, and then edit the results. But yeah, it was a significant number, and he rolled like an 8 for initiative, which is pretty good anyway. But I realized that no matter what die I chose to use, and there were several that rolled high that were singletons, I was like, I could just throw one of these at it, because I've got several sets here. Oh, excuse me. And the way monsters work is they basically have a form type technique, which determines what kind of powers they can use. So he had some for 2 and 3s, he had some for 3 and 4s, he had some for 5 and 6s, and he had one for 8 and 9 that he could use twice. Well, the one that he could use twice was a poison-based attack. And I've decided to nerf this attack a little bit after seeing it in action. It's rank, I want to say it's rank 2 or rank 3. So it wound up being a rank 5 attack when he attacked with it. So he struck first, and he had 2 rank 5 attacks. One that went to one character, one went to another one. They managed to withstand the rank 5, but the rider effect of this is if you get poisoned with it, it's another rank 5 poison. So they basically had to deal with 2 rank 5s each. And their effort pools and their prana in the first round wasn't up to snuff for dealing with that. I'm used to being able to drain big pools of prana into defensive techniques. That's not the case now. Your pool starts really low. So if you get hit with a really deadly alpha strike, you don't have a lot of option to nerf it, even if you have good defenses. So that's something to consider in this, that alpha strikes have actually gotten considerably deadlier. So I opted to nerf that down to maybe a rank 3, because I think a rank 5 and a rank 3 rider is about something that would have hurt them but not completely paralyzed them. Another issue I've been having, and this is the third issue that I encountered tonight, but also just a thing that I've been kind of like pecking at a little bit, is the way that imbalances work is when you take an imbalance, the first round that it pops up, you have to deal with the dramatic thing, because you can't eat your effort dice to deal with it. What I might do is say, okay, if you want to, you can sacrifice already rolled effort dice. And the reason I say that is because the paralyzing powers. I have this poison and the 5-star spirits kung fu give them special abilities to paralyze their opponents. And what I generally see is that guy goes first, gets a weak attack off, and totally paralyzes the big bad guy. And in this case, 2 of the players are on the receiving end of that, and I liked it a lot less. Even though I've ruled that although you can't move or do proactive actions, you can do reactive actions, including defenses, with no penalty whatsoever. I still felt it effectively robbed them of a full turn, and it totally inverted the value of all their sets. So if they'd rolled really well that turn, that's a really good way to just kind of rob them of that. Now, on the one hand, strategically, that makes a lot of sense. He looks like he's about to kick our asses, let's paralyze him. On the other hand, next round, it'll be all of 1 die that eats. So its value enormously changes from round 1 to later rounds. And it kind of goes into that same alpha strike problem, where if you hit first and hit the right way with either poison or paralysis of some variety, then you can really annihilate single powerful enemies. So, I don't know. I've been thinking about it. A reasonable mitigation mechanism would be to just have them sacrifice already rolled dice, but at the same time, I like that there are status effects that can kind of alter the paradigm of power levels that's more apparent. He said, inadvertently alliterating a whole bunch. So, I don't know. I've not been super thrilled with it, but it does actually feel like what happened in Fist of the North Star, because generally in Fist of the North Star, when he did his thing, they'd have a beat where they're like, that didn't do anything. Then they would explode, right? Or be paralyzed or whatever. The early stuff is paralysis in this one, and then the later stuff is explosions. So, I do like it, because in later rounds within that fiction, they would usually find some kind of way to deal with it, if they were able to deal with it at all. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that it can come out of left field and consistently be a surprise to them. So, I don't know. I will say the second player that got hit, he was one of the guys that was designing a kung fu. And the kung fu he designed, actually he designed a whole clan, but the clan he designed and the kung fu he designed gives you extra health levels that slowly bleed out and deal damage to you. So basically you can like do the earthbound thing where you get hit and then your health slowly trickles down. And I thought that was a cool concept. It's a little bookkeepy, but like, you know, whatever. And then their later powers allow you to either nullify that, so they're true extra health levels that kind of consistently heal, or you can do stuff with them like power your spells or your kung fu if you want to take damage for it, or you can reverse it and make it damage to the opponent. So there's all kinds of cool shit that happens later on. I am gonna need to go through the specifics of that, because he took that hit on the chin, the first one, and the second one actually paralyzed him. So those two things happened, and he was lying there with these 3 extra health levels completely filled up, and not a lot he could do with them. So I think he might have just bitten off more than he could chew. And I think if he'd been a little more proactive in defending against the initial attack, things would have been better for him. Anyway, So I think it was a reasonably accurate test, and I think Dan Chong wound up kicking a lot of ass. I don't I don't think that I don't know. That's another thing. Like when it comes to aggravation, is that if he keeps hitting with that attack and he does just a small amount of actual injury damage and a ton of aggravation, all he's really doing is giving you an ever bigger negative you have to take instead of being paralyzed. I guess that makes sense, but I feel like that should eventually cap off, you know? Like, I don't want there to be like a rank 15 imbalance on you. So I have to examine that. Anyway, the real star of the show was whenever Spiteful Prince's player floated out of the tent and psychically picked up a box of bombs and decided to just kind of carpet bomb the area outside with those, blowing up the tanks that they can no longer use and dropping bombs on Dan Chong's army. And I realized that I didn't really have a way to make that happen. I mean, like, on the one hand, I could roll for them as groups of 10 and have each group of 10 have their own 10 line of dice and defend that way. Or I could just say, you know, if you drop a bomb on a given area, everyone in it is vaporized, essentially. And there wasn't, like, I didn't have any option that made that kind of tactically satisfying to me. Like, I didn't have anything that could tell me really clearly, like, oh, well, these guys are taking cover, and these guys are out in the open, and these guys will panic, and because there was one army, right, that was spread out, like, across this entire the dark market complex, and they were in different places with different units who were doing different things, and it still felt like one cohesive whole was being struck, but it was being struck piecemeal, so it should have operated something closer to like the way that monsters operate. And I didn't have any translation mechanism. So yesterday, the first time I really got a chance to sit down and do some significant writing about this, yesterday I spent the entire day, like literally 8 hours, thinking about and running the logic of making another segment of the rules, a nice concise segment about doing big armies and doing them passively, such as that you wouldn't have to roll any additional dice. They would just do stuff. And I've already kind of hinted at that in the warfare rules that are in there already, where right now it's supposed to be you have a 10 line of like a vanguard unit, and then everyone else just kind of rolls on a chart to see what they do. But I don't like where that sits, because it kind of implies that they have access to certain kinds of weaponry that they don't necessarily have. And it wasn't, I don't know, it didn't feel fundamental enough to really make it work. So I have a new set of warfare rules, and I went back to the core logic of here's how individual actions work, here's how cooperation works, which I haven't really expanded on a lot, and it's pretty simple. It's just take two equally sized sets, combine them, and you can have a rank +1 set with the same facing between two characters. You can't do it with one character, you can do it with two characters. So that's cooperation, and single actions are just rolling the effort pool. And then after that, there's group tactics, where you grab effort pools and you slam them together, but that has a lot of restrictions on it. Like, obviously when you're operating as a group, you're not able to do like your own unique stuff as well. So I've added some restrictions to that where anyone can do that. So there's a reason to do it, like if you just want to have like some extra bodies that are defending you and have a bigger effort pool. But there's also some weaknesses to it, like you can only use form style kung fu and you can't use any costed martial arts. And I like that because it would mean that you're kind of burning too brilliantly to effectively cooperate with anyone else. And I like that a lot. I like the idea that you command lesser troops, but you don't necessarily group up with them and fight like buddies. So I like that there's like a line there between a newly established line between fighting as a group and fighting as an individual with a group that you're commanding. And then finally, the third level, the platoon level is what I'm calling it right now, is about abstracting away all the rolling and just saying, okay, you get actions based on the number of troops. And the minimum brick of that is 100. Or rather, the minimum brick that really functions is 100. You can have less than 100, but it's not as good. But yeah, so I've done little things that have made those a little more real in the world. Like I've determined how much of a space a given unit has to occupy. And I've determined like what happens when that whole space gets attacked with a single attack, like in the case of the carpet bombings. And it's very, I've done it such as that your army has stats that are just numbers, and when they attack, it's just stats that are numbers, and has nothing to do with any rolling. So you can very quickly, as a GM, just kind of assign them tasks, and then have them kind of automatically do them. And so for the players, they just get a number of, okay, if you want to break through that fort, it's going to be an attack of X. And they're going to shoot you with this barrage of bullets, and that's going to be an attack you've got to defend against, and it's attack Y. And that really helped a lot. I also made them a little bit flexible in that I gave them the ability to take actions that weren't like, they were like skill actions, so they could do stuff like power actions or endurance actions or really any kind of action, as long as you could justify it. And I found a set of I think it's 2 or 3 principles that are very simple that like worked with the logic of the game. Because one of the things that's really challenging when it comes to abstracting big groups like that is that the core principle of role-playing games, in my estimation, is a character can do what a person can do. Like, that's the most fundamental principle. And so you can use that to determine when and if you need to consult other mechanics. You know? So I want to walk across this bridge isn't something that requires a roll. You know, I want to open this door. You know, I want to talk to this guy. None of those require you to break out of this, you know, the call and response of talking about what the characters are doing. And when you do, it's significant, and the mechanics of those games make very clear incentives, and they have like unambiguous specificity to them. But when you need some more ambiguity, when you need less specificity, you can appeal to that fundamental rule. You can do what a person can do. Well, when you abstract people, you kind of, especially whenever you abstract people and you just look at them numerically, like imagine I took those 100 people and I'm like, the basic rule is for every 10 people you get a rank 1 that you can do, and you can combine these. So I was like, okay, I've got 100 people, I'm going to do a rank 10 agility action. I'm going to make them run as fast as a jet, you know. Or I guess that's like a, what would that be now? Well, anyway, I make them run stupid, ridiculously over 100 miles an hour fast. That doesn't make any sense. 100 dudes can't do that no matter how much they cooperate, right? But the principles help you to kind of interpret that and see, well, could they? Because in some cases it's not impossible, right? Because if you take those same 100 people and you have them board a rocket train and operate it, then yeah, they could get to agility 10 pretty quickly. It's circumstantial. And so the principles are that they still retain that thing where, you know, you can do what a person can do, but instead that's replaced with the group of people can do what a group of people could reasonably accomplish if they cooperated and focused their efforts. So that's an expansion of that general principle that allows the abstraction to remain. And the other thing is, and I did this in the first draft of the war rules too, if you have people that are ready for war, there's kind of an assumption in this game that in the setting broadly, no matter where you are, as long as you take an entire scene as an army to scavenge for implements of war, you can cobble something together. You can have like stone and bronze age tech plus whatever garbage is floating around, and that allows you to have at least enough to be a soldier or a warrior at least. So going from that principle, I added a foundational level of technology they would always have, which is that, like stone and bronze age with occasional little spikes into industrial age stuff. That's just assumed to be what they're equipped with. Because it's so ubiquitous, why wouldn't they be? So as long as you can justify an action you are proposing as the person who is proposing actions for this platoon, and you can justify it with, well, a group of people operating together could do this, and with the stone and bronze age post-apocalypse tech they have easy access to, and you can make specific examples there, you know, they would be able to accomplish this. So you can do stuff that you wouldn't suspect you'd be able to do. Like, okay, rank 10 for power is really powerful. That's like batter down steel doors and kind of things. Pretty amazing, right? And even if they really wanted to cooperate, 100 people probably couldn't do that unless they had a battering ram. But it's not actually beyond the pale for them to find some repurposed thing and rig up a battering ram within the scope of their action and start battering down a door. Even as effectively as a rank 10 strike would do it. So those principles actually help me quite a bit to make that abstraction function. And it means that you can use huge, I mean, colossal numbers of dudes and still do them quickly and do them succinctly with a minimum of bookkeeping and a minimum of rolling. So the current draft is getting, I've got the logic draft, as I call it, written out, which tells me all the specifics of how the rules work. And I'm currently writing a redraft of the entire war and siege section. So I've got all that stuff written out, and I want to do it a lot faster and punchier and a little more in character. That's the next thing I'm going to be sending out to all y'all. And let me see. Let me give me 5 more minutes here. Also on the docket, I've had the playtest group, one of the online playtest groups that I've had has requested that I get character gen done reasonably quickly. So I'm going to peck at that a little bit today. I might not have it done today, but I'll have it done in the not too distant future so y'all can use the mechanics that are already there to make characters. After that, the Gupt Kala are very important, and actually I'm doing the war combat again so I can get the Gupt Kala done, because I did I was writing out the logic for the courtier, which is pretty easy, the doctor, which I had to do a few things for, the sorcerer, let me see what else, doctor, courtier, sorcerer, there's a couple more. And anyway, I got to the warrior, or the general as I call them, because the warrior's art was in Legends of the Wooland, and I'm doing the general's art, which is kind of the same thing. And I realized that I didn't have a robust enough set of war rules to make their powers make sense. So I was like, okay, all right, I got to do something with this. So I revisited the war rules. Oh, priest was the other one I was doing. You get the sorcerer and the priest. Anyway, so war mechanics today. Maybe, possibly do character gen. And then the Gupt Kala is the next thing. It's going to be either this weekend or early next week. So once those are done, it's going to be the 2 biggest things I got to do after that. Is I've got to revisit the sections that are already written. You guys have access to that. And I've got to make sure the writing has one unified voice. And I kind of like the sort of 90s punk dude yelling at you voice that I've been adopting for the most recent writing, so I'm going to keep that one because that's fun to read, and it keeps you in the mind that although this is, you know, a game, you're reading the rules and what have you, you're supposed to be having fun, and you're not supposed to take it too terribly seriously. It is really kind of up to you how much you engage with the specifics of the mechanics, and I think that's a pretty good attitude for a game that has as much open-endedness and interpretation as this one does. Bottled water is good. So I need to do that, and then I need to do the lores, and that's basically it. As you can tell, we're really far along in the writing. The combat mechanics are done. The sea mechanics are, if not done, at least in a form where they're nearly there, and the redraft ought to fix them up. What else? The Kung Fu is largely written down. I think you can see that there's some styles that are missing, but there's no style that doesn't have something written down for it somewhere that I'm now going to go in and fix up. I just need to actually type it up, so it's going to happen as I'm doing the rest of this stuff. The Gupt Kala is a notable gulf. The XP mechanics are a notable gulf, but those are actually going to be chair gen, because the way you get XP is determined by... Well, it's determined by your Dharma, which is how you turn these situations of the world into quests that you can go on to give you XP. So it's a mechanism that basically creates a 3-act structure for you. It's not super complicated, but there's enough there that I need to be careful with it and do it correctly and playtest it. I didn't mention the monsters or the machines. The thing is, the lores have 2 dimensions to them, the clan lores and the area lores, or the region lores. And the region lores are where you're going to see a lot of the specifics of what kinds of monsters and what kinds of vehicles are in a place. So that's what I'm going to use first, and then afterwards I'm going to go and add stats to all of those, and that'll be the bestiary in the armory. So yeah, that's about half an hour's worth of listening to me talk. That was a pretty dense session. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go and get to writing. And, yeah, I need to have a graceful outro to these things. But I don't. Bye.